Hi, it's Rich on Planet PE and welcome to our final last minute revision session. So sorry if the quality isn't the best. So just tell me, that would be amazing. So let's just pop you across in here so I can actually see everything. There we go. Right. So hello to those people who have just joined us. So we've got Sean, I think we had him the other night, and there are 8 of you watching. Very daunting. Okay, so what we're going to look at with this one is the AQA syllabus, because that's the one I teach, but there might well be lots of it that are going to be relevant to your specification. So as we go through the different topics, in the comments, if there's anything that you're not too sure about, please try and have a look, put it in the comment, because it might be something we can help with. Now, if we go off on tangents along the way, we'll come back to it eventually. So what we need to try and do is use the comments and make sure that we're going to go through things. So I've had a few people already saying do 9 markers, go through the extended questions. Absolutely, we will do that. If you've not seen them already as well, I've also got a video on that one looking at the extended questions. So let's just go through that question. The question of the exam itself. So we know that tomorrow's exam is going to be 75 minutes. So we get 75 marks along the way, and you've got to make sure that you are prepared as you can be, and that is why you are here. So let's just have a look in the comments, see what people are after. So we've got do 9 markers, we've got components of fitness and fitness testing. Absolutely. So I've got a little note here because there's going to be lots of comments, I'm sure. We've got planes and axis. Absolutely, we will smash that one. Oxygen deficit. Okay, so oxygen debt, or EPOC is what we need to call it in our one. Training methods. Yep. Principles training types, diet and hydration, they are in paper 2 topics, so don't worry about that tonight. Performance enhancing drugs is a paper 2 topic. Heart, levers, okay, lots and lots of comments. So if I miss your comment along the way, keep posting it and I will hopefully get to it shortly. So let's start by looking at, let's go for levers. Okay, so I'm going to start off looking at levers. So I'm sure your teachers have spoken to you about this. So either 1, 2, 3 FRE or 1, 2, 3 FLE. Sorry if my webcam's the wrong way around. My posh camera doesn't quite work. So if we are looking at levers, all we need to understand is what is in the middle. So here's a question for you. If you see something looking like that, there is a problem with it. Okay, so does anybody know what the problem is if you draw a lever looking like this? So someone's saying it's a 2nd class lever. I totally rock. We'll see about that. Okay, anyway, so we've got the arrows. What's the problem with the arrow? The force is the wrong way. Fantastic. Okay, so the first thing to look at that is going to cost you marks is if you do a 1st class lever, which is this, that way around, you do not get a mark. So if I am pushing up and that is pushing down, essentially I will look down the whole time. So we've got to make sure that our arrows are going the correct way. Okay, so it's going to be like a seesaw and I've got to make sure I do that one. So if we look at levers, we've got to think about a few different things. One, so you know what is in the middle. So we need to understand that we've got the fulcrum middle in this one and then which way they're going. You then need to understand where in the body that is going to occur. So obviously we've got our 1st class lever looking like that. We've got our 2nd class lever, which is going to have the load in the middle. So you're going to draw your box in the middle and your fulcrum at one end. And obviously your arrow this time is going to be pushing up like that. So our 2nd class lever is looking like that. Now what we're looking at is, with that one, the ankle. Okay, the ankle is the most efficient joint we have in the body. You can lift your entire body weight on 1 foot. We're pretty amazing. So within there, that means that we've got a massive mechanical advantage. So because the load is in the middle, it means that the load arm is shorter than the effort arm. Now that gives us a mechanical advantage. Now if we compare that to this one, there is no mechanical advantage because they are equally distance away. So our 3rd class lever is then going to be slightly different because obviously we're going to have the effort in the middle. Now last year we had a question that really confused people. So how can the elbow joint be a first-class lever and a third-class lever? So let's have a look. Predict the 9-mark question. I think I've already tried that on one of the other videos. So how can the elbow joint be a first-class and a second-class lever? Bicep or tricep working, well done, Jack. It purely depends on the movement that's going across. So Arian, yeah, you're absolutely right. So the bicep attaches across the elbow. So if I'm in here, my bicep actually attaches this side of the joint and pulls on the bones that way. Okay, that's what makes it a third-class lever. When I go into extension, that becomes a first-class lever. Rashini, could you write them down? I'm not sure what she wants to try down. What are the predicted topics? Okay, I could write them down along the way, but really predictions are a little bit irrelevant because at this point we need to make sure that we are prepared for every single one. So just have a look at that along the way. So someone's saying about components of fitness and fitness testing. Yeah, we'll go through that. So I'm going to start off looking at levers, and then we're going to do planes, and then we'll move on to some of those other ones in a sec. We will definitely do the lung volumes because that's another one that people struggle with. Hi, my name is David. Could you speak slower? Yes, I'm sorry. I do ramble a little bit. So there are 184 of you watching at the moment. Quite 3 planes and 3 axes. So what we need to understand is what a plane is. So if you were to get that tomorrow in the exam, you would be asked something like define a plane. Now, all that means is that we are looking at a direction of movement. So if I was to chop myself in 2 halves like this, then I'm going to get a left and a right. Now, in your exams, this is a tip for you to try and make sure that you are going through the topics and finding a way that is going to help you. Okay. So if I was to use my hands, I can get a left and a right. Okay. Now, what that means is that is created a sagittal plane. So if I can move my hands in different directions, I can move forwards or I can move backwards. Now, what a sagittal plane means is that you are going to be creating flexion or extension. So if I am going to move my elbow forwards or backwards, that's on a sagittal plane. So it's going to move forwards or it's going to move backwards. Now, that's really all you need to know as far as the sagittal plane is. If you were to see they had flexion at the elbow, you know that that is going to be a sagittal plane. It's laggy. I'm sorry. Let me just try and sort that out if that's the case. I've got a few things open along the way that are trying to help. It's laggy, it's laggy, it's laggy. Right, apologize. Right, let me just try and change something on here that might be causing it. Sorry about delay. Right, give me a shout if that's getting better. Dude, sort the friggin' Wi-Fi. Okay, yes, this is AQA. Is that any better as far as the lag that we get in? It might be because I've actually got some people watching for a change. Thank you. Okay, so sagittal is flexion extension. Okay, now we've then got our frontal plane. So we've got a front and a back. Again, if I was to move my hands in opposite directions, it moves a left and a right. So with our frontal plane, we are going to create abduction and adduction. Okay, so if you see a picture of a goalkeeper making a save and it asks you what plane they're working on, then that is a frontal plane. So therefore you can think about the front and the back, and we divide it that way. The next one is that I can divide as a top and a bottom. So if I go like this, I can then move my hands that way. So when we're looking at rotating, that would be such as a discus throw or a forehand in tennis, then that would be a good example of a top and a bottom, which is our transverse plane. Okay, so that is more rotation. Okay, so they are the planes. Okay, sorry if it's backwards on your screen, but you get an idea on the way. So they are the planes. Now, planes also come with an axis. Now, an axis is a point of rotation. If I was to twist in my chair, that means I can rotate a particular way. Now, they come in pairs and they they can't be any other way. So I can't run forwards and spin round, for instance. So a sagittal axis always comes with a transverse plane. So if you think about when you run, you run by leaning forward slightly or backwards slightly. Okay, a few of you have been a little bit rude at the moment, so I'll just stop doing it if needs be. So with a transverse axis. Okay, so sagittals always come with a transverse, and a transverse plane always works with our longitudinal axis. Okay, so that's how we kind of go from there. Okay, whereas a frontal plane always comes with the sagittal axis. So think about this one. I always fall sideways. Okay, that's the easy way to think about it. So if we're going to be falling sideways, which is goalkeeping, then we are doing frontal planes and a sagittal axis. So that is planes and axes. Now, a few of you earlier said you wanted to look at components of fitness. Is that the next one you guys want to have a look at? Someone's saying open and closed environments. That's a paper 2 topic, so don't worry about that at the moment. Can we do injuries again? Yes, we can. Fractures. Okay, so let's go components of fitness first then. So I just get up what I have in front of me. Okay, so someone's saying heart and lungs and that, prevent injury. Okay, let's do that. Let's do the heart. We can do that super quick. Okay, so when you think about the heart has 4 chambers. Okay, so the easiest way to draw a heart is like that. Okay, now with the heart, the easiest way to think about it is Aston Villa. So those dodgy lots from Birmingham is the easiest way to think about it. So at the top, I've got atrium. At the bottom, I have ventricles. Now, in that situation, what we need to understand is the ventricles are the pumps. So your blood is going to be pumped out of the ventricle. Now, the reason that that's significant is because the ventricles are the things that increase in size and strength because of exercise. So if we are going to exercise, we're going to get some long-term effects of that. We'll look at that in a second, because I think that, for those of you, might be one of the extended questions looking at the effects of exercise, because it wasn't asked at all in the paper last year. Okay, so in our heart, we've got this as it is at the moment. Now, the ventricle, the left ventricle, is the most important one. Now, if we understand that the aorta is the largest blood vessel in the body, that sends oxygenated blood out to the entire body. So everything that we receive as far as oxygenated blood normally comes from the left ventricle. Okay. Now that means that the body is going to receive our oxygen and use it. So the body is going to use it. So that could be anything such as the brain, the muscles, anything along the way. Now, because that blood has now become deoxygenated, it has to then go back to the heart. And the way it does that is through something called the vena cava. So the vena cava is a vein, and it sends blood from the body through to the right atrium. Now, the blood then goes through the atrium into the ventricle and is then pumped out. Now, anything to do with the lungs is called pulmonary. So if I think about the pulmonary artery, that is the pathway of blood from the right-hand side of the heart, where it's now going to go back to the lungs. So we're now at the lungs. That blood is now oxygenated, so it has to return back to the heart so it can go and then get around the rest of the body. The way it does that is it enters the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. Okay, so looking at it like that. Okay, so if you are asked tomorrow about describing the pathway of blood around the body, then that's what we need to do. We need to understand that the heart is in 4 chambers. There are 4 blood vessels that are responsible for it. One side of the heart, which is the left-hand side, is oxygenated. The right-hand side of the heart is deoxygenated. Okay, so that right there is the heart and the pathway of blood. Okay, let's have a look. He's waffling bears. Okay, that cannot be explained in 2 seconds. Okay, if you want a quicker one, go on one of the videos because they are on there. Okay, so can you show how planes and axes link to sport activities? Yes, so planes and axes link to sport activities because of the direction they're moving and how we're rotating. So a transverse plane with a longitudinal axis would be things like me rotating around myself. So if I was to think about playing a forehand in tennis, that would be an example of that. If I'm running forwards and leaning forwards, then that would be a sagittal plane with a transverse axis. So they come in pairs that way. So I remember guys have veins. Yes, so veins have valves to prevent backflow. And the reason for that is that they don't have the same amount of pressure, so blood can end up backing up really, really easily. So we're saying performance enhancing drugs. Yeah, we'll look at that in a sec because I think that's something that you might see in an extended question. Lots of people asking about 9 markers and 6 markers. So we'll look at that now. So we'll use performance enhancing drugs as our topic, and we'll look at the different drugs that might help. And I think that you will see that tomorrow, possibly in an extended question, because there wasn't a lot on it last year. So let's think about a question that we might have. So if we are going to see a 6-mark question or a 9 marker, you're either going to be asked to evaluate or discuss. Now, the difference between those is that if you're evaluating, I'm saying that, yeah, this one is better, this one's worse. If I'm doing a discuss question, I need kind of 2 sides of the argument. Okay. Paper 2 is drugs. Paper 1 is drugs, mate. Do you think mental preparation will come up in a 6-mark? Mental preparation is a paper 2 topic. Okay, so lots of people asking about performance enhancing drugs. Okay, so we need to make sure that we know about those things. And yes, it is a paper two topic. Sorry, but again, lots of people are asking about that. So again, we can do that one on Thursday if needs be. But the point was that I was going to show you that through how to answer 9-mark questions. Okay, so discuss why a boxer may be tempted to use performance enhancing drugs. Okay, decent example there. Now in AQA, in any exam question that you will see for a 9-marker, you get 2 marks for AO1, 2 marks for AO2, and 5 marks for AO3. Okay. So it is, yeah, drugs is paper 2. I completely get that, but all we're looking at is just trying to look at the topic as far as trying to ask about how to answer a 9-mark question. We can change the topic if needs be. Let's do that then. Okay, so let's do it on training then. Okay, so methods of training. So AO1 is worth 2 points, AO2 is worth 2, and AO3 is worth 5. Okay, so that's how your marks are allocated. So the maximum amount of marks you can get for just giving fact after fact after fact is 2 marks. The AO2 aspect of you giving some sport examples is potentially worth another 2 marks, but you are capped at that. So you can't get loads and loads of marks for just giving facts after facts after facts. Okay, so let's have a look at training methods. So let's say we got an exam question saying something along the way of Mo Farah is a marathon runner and he may be choosing to do continuous training. Okay. Now you might be asked to evaluate the use of continuous training for Mo Farah. So the first thing that you need to do is define that. So if you define what you're doing, then you're going to get a mark, no doubt about it. So the first thing is define what it's asking you about, whether it's asking you to evaluate it or it's asking you to discuss it. Okay, now that's going to get you a maximum of 2 marks until you start to say how it's actually used in the activity. You're going to limit what you can do. So the next thing is then give some examples. So if I was to define continuous training as a method of training to improve cardiovascular fitness without any breaks, then I might get 1 or 2 marks in there because I've said about the component of fitness and how it's done. I would talk about the heart rate. So the training zone for it would be between 60 and 80% of your maximum heart rate. I would then say that it's going to last for longer than 15 minutes. So that would be my definition. Okay, so 15 minutes plus, no breaks. And my examples would need to now be, how is that going to be beneficial for Mo Farah as a marathon runner? Okay, now there's lots and lots of benefits for it, because obviously he's going to improve his cardiovascular fitness, which is the most important component of fitness. So I'm starting to already there be around about 3 marks. So we're then asking to then say how that might be used and how that might help him. So that's where we're starting to now bring in some AO3 content. Okay, now with the AO3 content, you need to then provide some examples and also some alternatives. So when you are going through, make sure that you are saying, this is going to be good because, this is not good because, and this might also be used. So if all we did is continuous training, we'd end up with fantastic cardiovascular fitness. Brilliant. But we might need some speed, we might see some power, because we might get a change in terrain and things like that. So you could argue that maybe interval training was better. So the fact that we're going to be doing intervals for long periods of time, or fartlek might be better because of the change in pace that we have during the race. So they're the kind of things that in those extended questions that we need to have a look at. So let's have a look. Can you talk about isotonic and isometrics? Yes, I can. So isotonic contraction and isometric contractions are different ways that we contract our muscles to either create movement or hold a movement. Okay, so if I was a gymnast and I was going to be holding a handstand, I'm going to use a different type of contraction to if I was going to be doing a run or kick in football. So what that means is that isotonic contractions are kind of normal contractions. So there's movement going to take place. Isometric contractions mean that the muscle is going to remain the same length and therefore no movement is going to occur. So for instance, in a rugby scrum where we say crouch, there's a pause. So therefore that is isometric contraction. When I then move to then go into the scrum, for instance, that's now become isotonic contraction. So we've got isometric, isotonic. So isometric is still fantastic. Isotonic is where we have movement. What's plantar flexion and the opposite one? Dorsiflexion is the opposite one. Lots of talk about football. Talk about vasodilation. Okay, I will do that in a second. Intrinsic and extrinsic, please. They are their paper 2 topics. So is isometric like a plank then? Yes. So a plank would be a really good example of isometric contraction. Sports-related training with specific sports. So synovial joints. Yeah, we'll do synovial joints in a second. Can you talk about vasodilation? Yeah. Okay, so let's do that then. Will circumduction come up? Okay, circumflexion is not a movement. Circumduction is. Okay, so let's go for, we'll do lung volumes and then we'll go to vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Okay, if I just draw a very poor graph, we're looking at this. So you will see a graph, and on that graph, it will have some smaller wiggly lines, maybe a larger line, and then something like that. So it might look like that. Is isotonic, does the muscle lengthen shorten? Yes, it does. So isotonic is kind of normal movement as you think, okay? So this is an example of a spirometry trace. So some of you are asking about lung volumes. This is what we're after. So if we break our graph into 3 different points, then we need to be able to answer this. So if we've got this going on, so the graph goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, at a relatively similar rate, what would you call number 1? So in the comments, put 1 equals. So Lewis has already gone for it. So is Maddie, yeah. Well, I've got English and PE on the same day. Or on Friday, some people have got drama and PE at the same time. That's even worse. Okay, so lots of comments on tidal volume. Absolutely. Okay, so we've got tidal volume. Now, tidal volume is defined as the amount of air breathed in and out. Okay, so we're looking here at kind of a normal breath. So when I exercise, I'm going to increase my tidal volume. So if this is me at rest, when I exercise, that might get bigger. Okay. Now, if I was to take the largest breath in I can take, that is where we look at number 2. So if you think this is a big, deep breath in, anybody know what that one's called? So what is it called at number 2 on my graph? So as an inspiratory reserve volume, absolutely. So you are able in your exam to call it, there you go, Ron and Kira, IRV, inspiratory reserve volume. Okay, now does anybody know the definition for it? Vital capacity is not correct from lots of you. I'll tell you what vital capacity is in a sec. Is AQA similar to OCR? I believe so. I think most of them are very, very similar. The only differences are, I think, are the planes that are slightly different in some of them. The tidal volume is the amount of air you breathe in per minute. No, it isn't. What are the effects of exercise in the skeletal system? We'll look at that in a sec. The maximum of air taken in after a normal breath. Okay, perfect. Okay, we then got 0.3 here. Okay, so we've got the inspiratory reserve volume, or IRV. What is it when we come down here? Expiratory reserve volume. Good stuff. So well done, Maka 1. Okay, so you are able to say ERV. Okay, so we've got our ERV, which is then going all the way down here. And if you look, it drops way below that point of our tidal volume. Now, please remember, it is the maximum amount of oxygen that we can forcefully exhale on top of tidal volume. So obviously tidal volume is here, it's gone beyond that. In the same way that IRV, it's this distance between these two here. Now, there is also one other volume you need to know. So what would number 4 be? Okay, so we've got number 4. So we've got distance now between here, between the end of ERV and 0. Okay, lots of people saying residual volume. Fantastic. Now, here's a question for you. How much what volume is residual volume? So as far as a number. Yes, you need to know lever systems for paper 1. We've already done that one. So if you go back, you might see it. Residual, and Kira is saying 1.5 litres. Well done. So there's always 1.5 litres left in your lung. Okay, now for a 3-mark question, you might want to understand why. And the reason is that we don't want our lungs to collapse because our lungs are incredibly sticky. And if they touch each other, they might stick. So therefore makes breathing really, really tough. Okay, so let's have a look. What do you think will be in the exam? I've done a paper 1 video. I've done 2 actually. So last year's one is still apt as far as the topics that are in there. And I've also done one for looking at what I think could come up. So have a check out of those. And they're the kind of guesses, but again, I don't know. What about anticipatory rise? The anticipatory rise, as far as your breathing rate, isn't going to be a thing. Okay, more in your heart rate. But again, in AQA, it's not something that we really need to discuss. It's not one that's necessarily in there. Lots of people are saying synovial joints. Absolutely. So synovial joints, I'm sorry, this diagram is going to be horrible. Epoch, I will do it in a sec here. Thank you. Okay, so in a joint, actually, first of all, can you define what we mean by a joint? Is drugs a paper 1 topic? No, drugs is a paper 2 topic. Can they ask you a 6-marker on the heart? Absolutely. They could ask you about the adaptations to the heart, about the things that might happen because of training, the short-term effects, lots and lots of things. Were your predictions accurate last year? Yeah, they were actually, but again, it's guesswork. People still asking for vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Okay, we can do that in a sec. Yeah, so bone to bone wouldn't be enough. Lots of you guys have said where 2 bones meet. Yes, good. So where 2 or more bones meet. So for instance, if these were 2 bones, if they meet, they can articulate, which is therefore where a joint is. So in your synovial joints, there are things that you need to know as far as what the structure is and what it does. Okay, so if I drew a couple of very odd looking bones, like that. We need to, first of all, think about stopping those bones from colliding. So what is going to stop the bones from colliding? So what is going to stop that kind of aspect in there? Do all joints move? No. Okay, Lewis is on it. So Lewis is doing pretty well. Jesse, sadly, that's not quite the case. Good, lots and lots of people who are saying cartilage. Okay, so that is correct. So if I take my 2 pens, I don't want 2 bones colliding. Okay, so therefore, what happens is that we have cartilage that is going to stop that from happening. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that your cartilage acts as a shock absorber. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about. We then got a synovial membrane. Okay, so this is my synovial membrane. Okay, what does the synovial fluid do? Tegan, I'll answer that question in a second. Okay, good. It secretes synovial fluid. So synovial fluid is a lubricant. So we don't want our bones from colliding, but also we want them to be able to lubricate so they can move nice and easy. So if you think about this being a joint, it wants to move super easy. So synovial fluid is created by the synovial membrane, and it prevents friction, okay, and allows free movement. So if you've got a question about how the structure of the joint was to facilitate movement, then that's kind of what we're looking for. Okay, so we've got the synovial membrane so far, we've got synovial fluid. Now there are these wonderful little disc things that we have. So what might be these in your synovial joint? Okay, Jamal has it right. Okay, so does Jazz. Jazz has spelled it correctly as well. Yeah, well done you guys. So that is the bursa. Now the bursa are a bit like the gel sacks that you might have in your Air Maxes, where it's gonna be a bit of a shock absorber. So the bursa actually contains synovial fluid, so they will squish, which again helps you to absorb the impact, because if you're jumping, your bones actually want to move closer together. So again, it's another thing that helps it. Okay, now what is going to join the bones to each other? So what is going to be joining bone to bone? Some people are saying tendons. Some people, Alex is just massively out of order. Okay, the answer are ligaments. Okay, so ligaments join bone to bone, whereas tendons join bone to muscle. Okay, so they're the things that we've got to try and think about. Okay, what else do we need in here that we currently don't have? So what are we missing in our synovial joint of where we are? So ligament starts with I think leg is a bone. Okay, ligament, yeah. Good. So synovial membrane, we've already said that one. Joint capsule, fantastic. So the joint capsule is what kind of holds everything in place. Okay, so rather than us walking around with no synovial fluids, it's all escaping. We've then got the point which is being held together by the joint capsule. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got. Everyone's bound to get a 9 grade. Let's not, Thomas, because I think I can block people actually. Let's just go to the settings. Oh, good. I can actually get rid of people if we need to. So if people are going to be talk nonsense, I'll either stop this or we'll just kick people off. So can you do fitness tests? Okay. All right, Alex Booker, how do we get rid of you? Sorry for the pause, guys, because key people can't get it right because apparently they're just horrible people. Okay, so vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Yeah, okay, we'll do that now. So we have areas of the body that need to ensure that we have either more or less blood going through. Okay, so this is a really easy way to think about it. Okay, so vasoconstriction is where the diameter of the blood vessel gets smaller. Vasodilation is where the diameter of the blood vessel becomes larger. Okay, now the reason that's going to happen is to promote blood flow to go certain areas and not go other areas. So, for instance, if you were digesting food, you would want your blood to go to a certain area and be in your stomach, and maybe not be in certain other areas. So when we're exercising, that also happens. So when we exercise, we will promote blood flow by having vasodilation going towards the muscles, and get vasoconstriction maybe away from, let's say, our fingertips, because it doesn't really need water, it doesn't need blood. Okay, so vasodilation, vasoconstriction is that. Now, it also happens in one of the short-term effects of exercise. So when you exercise, you will see that you will get red, you will get hot, you will get sweaty. And the reason that happens is because of this, because your blood cells, so your blood vessels, so the capillaries particularly, will go from here to there, and blood will then rise to the surface of the skin. And we lose heat to then try and make sure that we don't overheat. So we lose heat through radiation. Okay, so that's where we are. Okay, so again, guys, keep it proper in the comments. Otherwise, again, my only option is that I'll have to come off, because I don't really want that on my channel. Can you do spirometry traces? We've done spirometry traces, so we just did that one. So it looked like that. So you've just missed that one. So you should be able to go back and watch that in a second. Blood shunting is this. Okay, so blood shunting is vasodilation and vasoconstriction, and about blood going through. Is intrinsic anything to be about on the other paper? No, it's on paper 2. Okay, it's not on this one. Smart targets is paper 2. So again, we'll do that on Thursday. Phase axis we've done. Long and short-term effects of exercise. If you watch the 5-minute video I did earlier on, it's in there. So decisive practice, that's a paper 2 topic again. So let's have a look at epoch. Okay, so epoch is something that you guys need to understand, and you might call it an oxygen debt. So here's one for you then. What does epoch stand for? So what do the letters EP, OC stand for? Good, lots and lots of people getting that one correct. So excess post-oxygen consumption. So what that actually means is that when I finish exercising, I'm still going to breathe heavily. So if you watch a 400-meter runner run the 400 meters, it's like it's the worst thing in the world. So they finish and they continue to breathe really, really heavily. And the reason for that is that they create an oxygen debt, and therefore it needs to get repaid afterwards. So during exercise, there's going to be points where we can't supply the amount of oxygen that we need. So therefore, what's going to happen is that your body will go, okay, I'm going to accept this. We create lactic acid, and then we replay that after by making sure that we then deliver oxygen that wasn't there originally. So that is what epoch is. So someone can comment, so replacing the oxygen that has been borrowed. Yeah, that kind of, but it's not really specific in what you're saying there. Do we need to know about ligaments? Yep, so ligaments join bone to bone. Types of injury, yep. I know we went over qualitative and quantitative earlier. Yep, so qualitative and quantitative data is something you need to know, and we'll look at that in a second, Kira. DOMS, yeah, we'll do that. Fit and sport, yes, that's something that we absolutely need to have a look at. We've got recovery methods. Oh, lots and lots of things. Okay, so let's go with the types of data. So you will definitely get a data question in your exam. Okay, it's going to be in paper 1, it's going to be in paper 2. So normally you might see things like a heart rate graph, and you've got to interpret what you see, and other times it might not be. So you might see tomorrow that you're asked to do a bar chart. You might ask to do a pie chart. Now, what we're going to look at is the different data that you might be given that you're going to then use in the question. So we've got quantitative data and qualitative data. So what do we mean by quantitative data? So Someone said qualitative data is using numbers, okay? Quantitative data is using numbers, okay? Now, if I go and get some heart rate data, that's definitely using numbers. But the other thing about it is that nobody can question it. So qualitative data is also completely factual, okay? Now, we have two things. We call it subjective or objective. This is objective data, so people can't question it. My heart rate was, I know, 100, and that's where it is. Whereas qualitative data might be in the form of an observation, it might be in the form of a questionnaire, it could be in a survey, and you might be asked about that. So Maki said it might be opinions. Yeah, so it could be, but the best way to say that is, rather than an opinion, is that it is subjective. So that means that it's an opinion of somebody, that somebody might have a different opinion than yourself. And that is what we call subjective data. Now, it's subjective because it's someone's subject, is the easiest thing to think about it. So you might be asked to define it. So using objective and subjective will definitely help. So what are the effects of exercise on the skeletal system? There are no short-term effects of exercise on it apart from injury, and the long-term effects would be increased bone density and a reduced chance of osteoporosis. Biology was tough, yeah, I heard that one. Right, principles of training, please. Okay, so fit and sport, let's go for those. So we've got fit and sport. Now, let's start with the fit principles, okay? Frequency, intensity, time, and type. So what that means is that if I was going to be regularly training, that I can go through and I can change how many times a week I train. So people are saying frequency, good. So what that means is that I might train 3 times a week, I might train 4 times a week. And the only thing that I've changed is how often I train. So frequency really means how often. We've then got the intensity. So what that one means is basically how hard I train. So can anybody put in the comments about how I can make training harder? So let's say I was doing weight training. Okay, heavy weights, yeah, good. Increase the weight and resistance, all those things, absolutely perfect. Okay, we can then look at time, which is how long. So if we are looking at this, okay, we're looking at how long, then we can train for longer. So I might do an hour session, I might do an hour and a half. So for instance, in this session, we've got 43 minutes. If I was going to do it for longer, clearly I just change the time. And then we have type. Okay, so with type, we are looking at basically what type of training we're doing. So I might be in a situation there where I'm going to change my type of training, okay, to make it more difficult or easier. So for instance, if you just did the same training over and over and over again, your body would get used to it. So we need to alter the type of training so we can do that. Now, these are 4 different ways that we can do progressive overload, okay? So if you're not sure about where they fit in, they are literally 4 different methods of progressive overload. Okay, I'm just going to turn a light on because it's getting a little bit gloomy. Just 2 seconds. There we go. Okay, so we've got 4 different ways of progressive overload. Now, that then fits to our sport methods of training. Try again. Principles of training. Now, what principles mean are that they are kind of the rules that you will use. So we've got specificity, which means that we are going to train for the type of activity. We're going to make it specific to the activity. So for instance, if I was a swimmer, then I would train specifically for that activity and then make the training suit that. If I was training for a marathon, I would make sure that I'm improving cardiovascular fitness. Okay, so therefore it's either to the sport, as Mosca says, or it's to the component of fitness. We've then got progressive overload. Does anybody know what the definition of progressive overload is? Vita, BMI comes up in paper 2. Good stuff, Archie Baker. So exactly that, gradually increasing the intensity of training. And the way that we do that is by the FIT principle. Okay, we then got this next one. Now, this is one that you could be tested on tomorrow. So we've got reversibility. Okay, now reversibility is where our training might go back to a previous stage of fitness. And why would that happen? So why might I go back to a previous stage of fitness? Yeah, what does Zoe? So Zoe says injury. Someone that's Kieran, actually, because you're lazy as F. Yeah, well, actually, it's not too wrong, really, because sometimes you get bored. Sometimes we get injured, and sometimes we just stop training. Okay, so if I was to miss lots of sessions because I didn't fancy it anymore, maybe because the type of training I was doing was repetitive, I might actually get less fit. Okay, and then the final one, yeah, good, Kira, is tedium. Okay, tedium means boredom. So if I was to get bored with my training, I'm probably going to stop doing it. So what we need to make sure is that we factor in our training that we're not going to get bored doing it, but actually it's going to be motivating. I might do it as a team and things like that. Okay, so we've done quite a few topics already. So let's have a look. This is all paper 1, poke of the dog. Yes, it is. Vita, diastole and systole. Okay, really, really easy. So both of them are blood pressures. Does anybody know what the definition of blood pressure is? Nobody is currently going through blood pressure at the moment. That bit being done. Ooh, Eddie, you're hilarious. Jamal Warden, yeah. So blood pressure is the force of blood pushing on the arterial walls. So if I think about the water I've got here is pushing on all the walls of the glass, that's what blood pressure is. Now we've got 2 different blood pressures. One of them is when the heart pumps or strokes, and the other one is when the heart is then relaxing. So your systolic pressure is when we've got our highest pressure, and diastolic pressure is when we've got our lowest pressure. Okay, so what you'll see is that if I set my heart rate, it might be 120 over 80, and that would be a normal figure. Okay, so we've got our top figure and our bottom figure. This is when it tracks. This is where it doesn't. Okay, simple as that. Okay, so diastole is when someone dies, they must react, kind of. Okay, lever systems we've done, Wenger. So let's have a look. Can you do types of injuries and the treatment? Okay, so injuries and treatment are pretty straightforward. So any soft tissue injury, so soft tissue would be a sprain or a strain. So we tend to sprain ligaments and we tend to strain tendons and muscles. And the way that we teach them, or treat them, I should say, is through rice. Now, I read an exam question a few years ago where somebody said they eat rice. That's not the right one. Okay, when we do rice as far as rest, ice, compression, elevation. Does anybody know why we do those? So why do we rest it? Cassidy, there's 350 people watching. I get a lot of comments on here. So Kira said swelling. It's not quite yet. So think about it. If I was to rest my injury, I'm going to prevent further damage. So Mad Gaming, exactly that. Okay, reducing further injury. So if I just sprain my ankle and I continue to then exercise on it, I'm going to make that worse. So the first thing is that I rest to prevent further injury. I'm then going to ice the joint. And why do we do that? So why do we ice the joint? Not to prevent DOMS, because remember, this is about injury. So Leah, to reduce the swelling, yes. Now, we want to try and reduce the swelling so that we don't lose any flexibility or movement in the ankle. We're then going to use compression. Okay, now compression is where we might wrap it in a bandage. We might, again, try and prevent blood flow to that area, which again prevents the swelling. And then the final thing is that we elevate the joint. So we try and then get it up above our heart, which again is going to be used to reduce the blood circulating to that particular part. Okay, so there where we are with treatment of injuries. Okay, so all we need to know for AQA is obviously rice. Okay, so could you please do something on training seasons? Yeah, training seasons is really simple. So we've got 3 training seasons along the way. So I have my pre-season. So if I was a cricketer, I might have just come out of my pre-season because it's now moving into the summer term. So with the pre-season is there to try and get a level of fitness. So you're trying to make sure that you are getting prepared and you're ready to then do the activity. Okay, we've then got our competitive season, or it's kind of the during the season. Okay, so with the competitive, all that you're doing there is you are maintaining your level of fitness. Okay, so this is what we call exactly that, our peak season. So I'm trying to peak or trying to get my performance at its very best at this point. So we have peak performance or the peak season. Okay, and now all I can really do at this point, sorry, get some text. All I'm doing at this point is trying to maintain my fitness. So if you think, so I think you lost your hair, I think I lost that a long time ago. I would have been a footballer and I might play on a Wednesday, I might play on a Sunday. So therefore, I've not actually got very much time to recover from the game to then actually improve my fitness. So all we try and do is just maintain the level of fitness. Okay, that's all the peak season is around. Okay, whereas our post season is all about making sure that in the post season that we are ready for our next season because we have spent enough time recovering from what we're doing. So we've got our pre-season, trying to get fit, peak season, maintaining fitness, post-season, recovery. Okay, now that could, and sadly was last year, one of the extended questions. So you'd probably see it in the exam, but I doubt you're going to see that as an extended question. Okay, so there we go. Right, let's have a look. Can you shout out? No, I can't. Okay, so let's have a look. Fitness tests. Yeah, we can do that in a sec. How specific do you have to be when describing fitness tests? Good shout, Liam. Liam, hi, mate. See you tomorrow. So you need to know the protocol for doing the test. So in last year's paper, people were asked about describing the vertical jump test. So you need to be able to say exactly how each test is conducted. So with the sit and reach test, for instance, we talk about using a box. We have straight legs. Our feet are flat against the bench with no shoes on. We then stretch by holding it as far as we can, and then we measure that way. So with the fitness test, you need to know the protocols and the component of fitness, and then who it would be useful for. So you could get an extended question on that. You could get an extended question talking about the use of it. So if I was going to be doing the vertical jump test, it would only test my leg power. And if I didn't need that in my sport, it might not be relevant. Okay. So could you do gaseous exchange? Yep, do that in a sec. Again, it's quite a straight, easy one. So people saying about the wall test. Some of the people put some pretty random questions. Am I a teacher? Yep. And some of the people I teach are currently comment on what we've got in here. So hi guys. So someone's saying extrinsic and intrinsic over and over again. They are paper 2 topics. We'll do that on Thursday. Talk about 6 markers, please. Okie doke. Okay, so 6 mark questions come just for the 9 mark questions. They are marked by getting 1 mark for your AO1 content, 2 marks for your AO2 content, and 3 marks for your AO3. So if you just know your facts and some examples to go with it, you can get 3 out of 6 marks, okay? That is still more than what most people get. You would be amazed by the national average. I think last year was something like 1.5 because people struggle with it, okay? PEDS is a paper 2 topic that we'll do on Thursday. Okay, lung volumes we've done. So in those 6 mark questions, you've got to make sure that you don't just recite facts. But if you just say facts, 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 you're going to get 1 mark. What you have to do is give the fact and then how it relates to the activity or the question. So if we were talking about fitness testing for a footballer, you would need to say that the vertical jump test is useful because it tests leg power. Leg power is used by a footballer when jumping for a header or trying to kick the ball hard. So straight away, we're starting to think about getting towards 3 marks there. Nina, planes and axis we did at the start, so sorry if you missed that one. Blood vessels in the heart, we've done that one. Drugs, again, is a paper 2 topic, so not worried about that one. Predictions of the 6 9-mark questions. Okay, I think you will get an extended question on the short-term effects and the long-term effects of exercise, or something about a method of training. So what we need to think about there is knowing the effects of those things. So if you're thinking about area 3 topics, then you would look at the effects, let's say, on the cardiovascular system. So the fact that when I exercise, my heart might become bigger. So therefore, we're thinking about cardiac hypertrophy. The impact of that is that I can move more blood every beat, so stroke volume increases. Therefore, when I am training, I'm going to find that I get, I've got a different training zone. Okay, so I've got more beats to play with because my resting heart rate would be lower. Okay, that is the term, Jamal. Well done. Okay, I think that term is going to be defined. I think you're going to get a question tomorrow asking you to define bradycardia. Explain hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is where a muscle becomes bigger or stronger. So your heart doesn't necessarily increase in size, but the walls of the muscles do. They get thicker. So that would be something that would help. So if I get cardiac hypertrophy because of my training, it's going to lower my resting heart rate because my stroke volume will increase. What is bradycardia? Bradycardia is a lower resting heart rate due to an increase in stroke volume. Explain stroke volume. Stroke volume is the amount of blood ejected from the heart in every beat, whereas cardiac output is the amount of blood ejected from the heart every minute. So John, yeah, bradycardia, but it's Brady with a Y, just bear that in mind. Fitness testing. Okay, so with fitness testing, you need to know the protocol of the tests and which component of fitness it improves. Okay, so again, super easy ones to research. Vasoconstriction and vasodilation we did earlier, Kieran. Okay, all that was, just to go back on it, was this. Okay, so vasodilation, vasoconstriction, so your blood vessel's diameter either gets smaller or gets bigger to either stop or allow more blood flow through. So vasoconstriction is smaller, vasodilation is bigger. Basic and complex skills are paper 2 topics. Mechanics of breathing. Yeah, let's do that one. Okay, so mechanics of breathing. So if I draw a couple of lungs and some dodgy ribs, let's do a better version of that because that was terrible. Okay, so this is a very odd version of some ribs and some lungs. Okay, so all we need to worry about is what happens to the ribs. Now, in between the ribs, there are muscles. Does anybody know what they're called? So what are the muscles called in between the ribs? Yeah, intercostal muscles. Okay, so the green things here are intercostal muscles. Now, in between your ribs, you will feel that you can, well, basically feel, if you have a pull and it's horrible. I did it once, I thought I was having a heart attack. So what they are doing is that they are lifting your rib cage up and out to allow more space. Now, that's because of pressure. And if you're doing A-level PE next year or BTEC sport, you need to understand that. Okay, we've then got another muscle, which is important, which is called the diaphragm. Okay, now the diaphragm at rest is curved. So when I breathe in, think about it. So if you, even if you examine, if you're thinking about what's going on, you're not that sure, put your hand on your chest and hand on your ribs. So if you then take a big deep breath in, you will see that everything moves up and moves out. Okay, so the ribs move up and out. Now, what happens to the diaphragm is that goes down and it actually flattens off. Okay, so what the effect of that is that we increase the size of our thoracic cavity. So that means the air is going to rush in, and then we will then be able to deliver oxygen through gaseous exchange. Now, on that, gaseous exchange is a factor. So gaseous exchange happens at the alveoli. Okay, so this is a particularly dodgy looking alveoli. Now, does anybody know what is surrounding the alveoli that allows air to get from the environment into our working muscles? Yeah, what did you ask? Okay, so they are surrounded by capillaries. So let's put capillary as being red. So surrounding the alveoli are millions and millions of capillaries. Now, the wall of the alveoli and the capillary is super, super thin. So as Random Carr says, they are only 1 cell thick. So if you think about this being really thin, it allows air to pass through and then go into the bloodstream. And that is carbon dioxide and oxygen. So all you need to think about is that carbon dioxide goes out of the capillary through the alveoli to get breathed out. Oxygen goes through the capillary into the bloodstream, and then therefore we can get that to the working muscles. Okay, alveoli have some pretty cool features. Okay, so if you watch my video the other day, you'll see how we can use a tree to think about the respiratory system. So if we look at the respiratory system, if I drew a bit of an upside down tree, that looks a bit like this, that is my respiratory system. So here we've got the trachea, which then branches off into the bronchi, which then branches off into the bronchioles, and at the end we've got the alveoli. So you might be asked to describe the pathway of air. Okay, so obviously it comes in the nasal passage. Okay, it goes down the trachea, it then splits off into the bronchi, into the bronchioles, and then finishes in the alveoli, where gaseous exchange takes place. Methods of training, please. Okay, we'll do that in a sec. I've already done place and axis, yeah. Explain how to identify levers, please, because they're complicated. Okay, levers is whatever is in the middle. It's the only thing you need to know. So if the joint is in the middle, then the fulcrum is in the middle. If it's the effort, again, it just changes. So 1, 2, 3, FLE is the way to remember it. So fulcrum in the middle on the first, the load in the middle on the second, and effort in the middle on the third. This is AQ area. So thanks, Amar. Yeah, I have a hairline, so does everybody else. I'm 36, mate. I'm not 16. Let's have a look at what we've got. So types of movement, please. Okay, so we've got flexion and extension. We've got abduction and adduction. And the one that people seem to forget about is about circumduction. Does anybody know what circumduction is? Let's have a look. So circumduction, 360 rotation. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I wouldn't hear it. And it goes through 2 planes. So circumduction is not this. Circumduction is like bowling, cricket, or swimming. Okay, so let's say I was doing the butterfly, that would be circumduction. Okay, because it rotates around the joint. Rotation is like using a screwdriver, and all it does is rotates around an axis. Okay, so there are your definitions. So we got to do discus. Wouldn't be, because discus would be just purely abduction come into adduction, so that wouldn't really be the one. Can you do definitions of types of components of fitness, e.g. Yep, I can do that in a sec. Place and axis, we've done that one, Cornelius. Thanks, Eddie, you're hilarious yet again. Good to see you revising and working hard on this one, mate. Do we need advantages in differential training method? Yes, you do. So you need to understand why it would be used and why it might not be used. Is the difference between AQ and AXL? Some differences, yes, but I don't teach that one, so I'm going through those. Okay, so let's go through the definitions, okay, of the different fitness training components. Bannister, I don't. Let's have a look. I don't know how to do that. Let's have a look. Pop out chat. There you go. I just worked out I can ban people. Even better. Cheers for that, buddy. Okay, so let's have a look at these different definitions because they are the important bits that you need to know. Okay, so just need to get rid of something I've put on the screen. Let's just go down, down, down. Sorry about this, guys. I've just got a few different things open. Okay, so components of fitness that you need to understand are agility, balance, cardiovascular fitness or endurance, and that might be called aerobic power as well. So if you see the word aerobic power, you are thinking endurance as far as your cardiovascular endurance. We're going to do coordination, flexibility, muscular endurance, power or explosive strength. And again, you might see this in the exam as anaerobic power, reaction time, and then we've got strength. So 3 types of strength. Can anybody tell me what the 3 types of strength are? Yep, so static, maximal, yeah, dynamic. Actually, we've got 4, think about it, sorry. Because explosive is also in there as well, so we've got 4. And then the final one, obviously, a component we need to know is speed. Okay, so let's do this one first then. So how do we define agility? So what's the definition of agility? So lots of people are saying movement, speed, direction. Yep, and lots of you are doing the proper one. So it is the ability to change direction at speed, and well done, Megan, whilst maintaining control. So that is what we need for that one. So you've got to factor in the control bit, because if you don't, you're going to find that you're not actually telling me about agility. All you're doing is talking about speed. So the ability to change direction at speed. So what about balance then? How are we defining balance? Because people tend to struggle with this one. Yeah, really good. So maintaining the body's center of mass over the base of support. And what that means is that if I was drawing an odd stick man, okay, that my base of support is the distance here. So the bits that are kind of on the ground and how they would form a base of support. Now, if I was to go on 1 foot, obviously I'm narrowing the base of support, which means that I'm more likely to become unbalanced. Okay, we've got cardiovascular endurance. So some people get confused about cardiovascular endurance and muscular endurance. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, what is the difference between cardiovascular endurance and muscular endurance? Tegan, can you go through one of those big questions at the end where you pick a suitable sport for someone and plan a training session? Yes, I can. You can put a note of that one. So, training session. Extended. Okay, that's on the list. Thank you, Tegan. Long short-term effects. If anyone wants that one, there's a video that I did earlier on. It's a little 5-minute one that will tell you everything you need for that one. So muscular endurance is CV, but for muscles. That wouldn't be enough for muscular. You need to make sure that you have a look at that one. Okay, so the ability to contract voluntary muscles repeatedly without becoming fatigue. Fantastic. That's a really good example, a good definition of muscular endurance. Whereas what is the definition then of cardiovascular endurance? The ability of the heart and lungs to supply oxygen to the working muscles. Yeah, really nice one, Peter. Okay, so we've got the differences. Now, where some people get a bit confused is that we will talk about cardiovascular fitness in relation to muscles. It's not. It's about the heart and the lungs and being able to supply oxygen and the blood to where it needs to go. Whereas when we look at muscular endurance, it's making sure that you're your muscles can continually go for long periods of time without fatigue. Here's one for you then. What is the definition of fatigue? Is everything you're going through paper one? Yep. Yep. Not being bedside, Ella, but I understand what you're saying. Okay, it's extreme tiredness. Okay, it's not okay to just say your muscles getting tired or you're tired. It's extreme tiredness, and that is a short-term effect of exercise because it's within 36 hours of exercise rather than being right there and then. What time do we finish? I'm going to finish in about 20 minutes time, so we'll do it until 9. That'd be an hour and a half. Okay, is this AQA? Yes, it is. Fartlek is different intensities, yeah. Okay, redistribution of blood we've done. Mechanical advantages and mechanical disadvantages we did earlier, but we're about to go back to that in a sec. Okay, so let's have a look. Can you explain the movements at the shoulder joint? Yes. Okay, so flexion is moving forwards. Extension would be you in your normal position. We've then got rotation, which is moving around the axis, and then we have circumduction, which is going to be moving around the joint. You've then got abduction and adduction. So if you think about abduction, then we're thinking about being taken away from the center line. Adduction, going back towards. Okay, so we've got those different, all those different ones in the shoulder. Emily, warm up and cool down, please. Okay, so a warm up is done to reduce the chance of injury, prepare the body for exercise, and hopefully improve performance. And the reason that we do that, Emily, is that we want to make sure that we're going to be as good as we can. So the first stage of a warm up is that we will do a pulse raiser, and that is to prepare the body for what we're going to do. We then are going to do some stretching, which is going to then hopefully increase the mobility of the joint, so therefore reduce injury. And then finally, we're then going to do a game-related activity. Now, the reason we're going to do that is to try and prepare the mind for what we're going to do. So we want to make sure that we're prepared mentally for what we're doing. So if I was doing if I was playing a cricket match, I don't want the first time I catch a ball to be in the game. Okay, so that's what we do with that one. Now with a cool down, the reason we're doing that is that we want to try and reduce the chances of DOMS. It helps your recovery, and also again is going to reduce the chance of injury further on, and hopefully try and increase our performance. So we do that by slowly reducing our heart rate. Okay, well, we won't just stop. We'll do things like jogging, and then along the way we will also do some stretching to get rid of the lactic acid. Okay, so let's have a look. Is the exam or physical worth more marks? Okay, so Nina, the exam is worth 60% of your grade, and the practical is only worth 40%. So paper 1 and paper 2 are definitely more valuable for us. Are you going to do a live stream for paper 2? Yes, I'm going to do that on Thursday. So can I go through the 6 and 9 markers? I'll do that in a second. Thanks, Nazis, bro. I really need that. We did that earlier, dude. So sorry if you missed that one. Again, when this finishes, you'll be able to go back and listen to it if you've missed any of the things are in here. What do I think will be on tomorrow? I think you're going to get things about the short-term and long-term effects of exercise. So that's why I did a quick video on that one earlier. I think you will be asked about training, but we know we're going to be asked about certain things. So if you've not seen my What's on Paper 1 videos, okay, these are the things that you may be asked in the exam. So we're looking at the structure and functions of the musculoskeletal system. So you have to know the structure of the skeleton. You have to know the functions of the skeleton. You need to know the different muscles in the body and the structure of a synovial joint, which we've done. You need to understand the different joints that are in the body. So we need to understand that we've got a hinge joint and we've got ball and socket joints. In AQA, you need to know that the elbow, the knee, and the hinge are, so the elbow, the knee, and the ankle are all hinge joints. We need to understand that the ball and socket joint is the hip and shoulder. You then need to know about the movements that occur at those joints. So you need to understand that we've got flexion, extension at the shoulder. the knee and the hip. We have abduction and adduction at the shoulder. We've got rotation of the shoulder, circumduction of the shoulder, but we have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion of the ankle. You then need to understand that we have our major muscles, and obviously they work in antagonistic pairs. So how are we with antagonistic pairs? Do you want to do that quickly? Yes, okay, so antagonistic pairs. Essentially, muscles can only pull on bones, they can't push. Okay, so what we need to understand is that the bones will pull, so the muscles will pull on the bone. And the reason that that is important is because it's the only way that movement can happen. So when it pulls on the bone, so if I think about my bicep muscle is pulling on the radius and order, it means that at the same time, the tricep is going to be lengthening. So they work as a pair. So they can't both pull at the same time. While one contracts and pulls, the other one just will relax. Okay, so therefore, that's what we mean by an antagonistic pair. Now, along the way, we know that we're going to get concentric and eccentric contraction, where concentric contraction is the muscle shortening, eccentric contraction is the muscle which is lengthening. Okay, I've just been talking for a long time here. So it's an hour and 16 minutes so far. Okay, so let's just flick through. You then need to know about the cardiorespiratory system. So the pathway there, we've done that. Gaseous exchange, we've done that. Blood vessels, obviously how they differ between their size, diameter, the wall thickness, and valves. Charlie, we've already done epoch. You need to know the structure of the heart, we've done that one. We need to know the cardiac cycle. We did that, so we did that with a nice little diagram. I assume this AQA, yes it is. Emma, mechanical disadvantages, really easy. Okay, so mechanical advantages, disadvantages for each of the levers. Just go back to that topic, some of you might have missed it earlier. Okay, so if this is a lever, we first of all do that by thinking about what's in the middle. Okay, so this one has F in the middle, which means that this is a third class lever. Now, a mechanical advantage or disadvantage is the distance between the effort arm, which is defined as the distance between the fulcrum and the effort, and divided by the distance between the load arm, which is the fulcrum to the load. Okay, now obviously in this one there is a mechanical disadvantage because the load is obviously much larger, or as far as a number, if this was a distance, than the effort. Okay, whereas a second class lever has a mechanical advantage because the effort is further away from the fulcrum than the load is. Okay, so that's all you really need to know. So it's divided to the load arm divided by the effort arm, and then from there. Okay, function of skeleton. Yeah, you need to know that one. What examples of the levers in the body? The neck is first class lever, the ankle is a second class lever, and depending on the movement, the elbow is either a first or a third class lever, depending if it's flexion, which is third, extension, which is a first class lever. LSC, isometric contraction, is where no movement takes place because the muscle stays the same length. Concentric contraction is where the muscle will lengthen. Isotonic contraction is where normal movement takes place because the muscle will shorten and pull on the bone. What time are we going to do live on Thursday? We'll do the same again, so it'll be 7:30. I think it's just an easier time for everybody to do it. It means I'm going to get back from work on time. Where are we to? Let's just keep going through. Disadvantages and advantages, levers. It's about mechanical advantage. That's all you can really kind of do for that one. Planes and axes we can do. Holly, you're hilarious. What a waste of time you are. Example of a 9 marker or a 6 marker. Yep, we can do that. And also, if you need me to talk you through one, go on my channel. There's a video on there. Okay, so go through an example of a 6 marker that I think might come up. Ooh, okay. let's have a think of topics that will give me just 2 secs on that one. The regions of the vertebrae. Again, that one it isn't really going to be in our spec, so that might be for those people who are on the way. We did spirometry ones. Yeah, I've got a lovely hairline. I know that one. Cheers, buddy. Can you talk about cardiac output? Yes, Blonde. Cardiac output is the amount of blood ejected from the heart per minute. Okay, and it changes if stroke volume goes up or if training happens. Yeah, so muscles only pull, they don't push. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so irregular. Oh, okay. So yeah, so for the functions of the skeleton, essentially you just need to know the different types of bones and what they do. So flat bones protect. We've got our long bones, which are for leverage. We've obviously then got our irregular bones that have specialized functions, and our short bones, which help to do fine movements. So do you need a calculator? Possibly, because if you get a question about heart rates and training zones, remember the training zones, 60 to 80% of your maximum is going to be your aerobic training zone, 80 to 90% is your anaerobic training zone. Now, to work out your maximum heart rate, it is 220, take away your age. So for you guys who are 15, it's 220, take away 15, so therefore 205. Can you do fitness test? We did that one earlier, Matt, as far as fitness tests. Just very quickly spoke about it. But again, all you need to understand with that one is the different methods and how they're done. We've spoke about pre, peak, and post tests already. Do we need to know all the protocols for all the fitness tests? Yeah, you should do. Let's have a look. Equations for respiration. Yes. So Ryan, if you were to put the equation for aerobic respiration and the equation for anaerobic respiration, you would get the mark. So if you were to ask to define those. Eddie, that's a paper 2 topic, so don't need to worry about that tonight. Thank you, Quinn. I know you had been here the whole way, so thank you for that. Okay, so let's just go through. Okay, I've got about 8 minutes left. Okay, Emily, the equations for respiration, you would have done a science as well, where we've got glucose and then your arrow, so the fuel, if we've got oxygen or not got oxygen, and then what comes out at the end. Okay, so that's what we need to look at. Tom, why is the heart a double pump? Because we've got a pulmonary and a circulatory system. Planes and axes you've done, guys. So those of you who have missed it, please go back over in a second because we look at that. Emily, yeah, that thing. Yep. Okay, my favourite sport is cricket. I was a bit of a cricketer before as a teacher. So 9 marker on how to train each type of strength. That's not a bad shout. That could be in there. Can you talk through type 1? That's not a thing for our spec, so don't worry about the muscle fibre types. So quantitative and qualitative we did earlier. Again, if you didn't see that, look at it. Is static stretching a method of training? Yes, it is how you can try and improve flexibility. Can you go over tendons, ligaments? Yeah, tendons join bone to muscle, ligaments join bone to bone. So 1, 2, 3 FLE means that 1 is F, so fulcrum in the middle. A second class lever is the load in the middle. F is on a third class lever. Flow of blood, we did that earlier. Ben. Thanks, Jake. I'm glad to see you revising after all this time. Okay, so who's going to win the Champions League? I think Liverpool will. How do you remember the components of fitness? However you can. I haven't really got a set way. We used to use Mary Must Careful Bill, so muscular strength, muscular endurance. Well, not a bit. It doesn't tend to work that way with the new ones. Okay, so just very quickly then, 6 mark questions, 9 mark questions. Okay, if you only give facts, you're going to get 1 mark on a 6 mark question or 2 marks on a 9 mark question. Relate everything you do to a sporting example and how that helps in the sport. So for instance, if you talk about speed for a sprinter, yeah, they need it, but how do they actually use it, and what is the effect of the speed? Obviously, a better chance of winning the race. Is blood doping on the exam? Blood doping is a paper 2 exam, so we'll talk about that on Thursday. Are there 7 or 8 markers? Not in AQA. No, we have 6 and 9 markers. Can you explain why ice baths are important for sports fauna? Yeah, it helps recovery, and it also reduces the effects of DOMS. Is aerobic respiration glucose plus oxygen equals carbon dioxide and water? You kind of just Google it. You'll see it in a sec. It's super easy, that one. Could you say speed is distance divided by time? No. So speed is the time taken to cover a distance. Just flicking through. Information processing model is paper 2, so I don't need to worry about that. Same with vitamins and minerals. Same with drugs. Condyle joints aren't on an AQA paper. Levers, advantages, we spoke about that earlier. What will be the 9 marker? If I was guessing, again, no real idea, I would think about something to do with either the cardiovascular system or the respiratory system, and maybe the effects of training on them. Spirometry graphs, we did that earlier, so please look over it. You know, there's big questions at the end week. Please say, for example, okay, Tegan, yeah, let's do that first then. We'll just do a quick example. Okay, so let's say that we are going to look at training. Okay, so let's say we've got 2 training methods. So if we've got weight training and interval training. Okay, so let's say that we've been given those, and we've been asked, let's say for a footballer, to discuss the use of weight training and interval training for a footballer. So the first thing we want to think about is we're going to define both of them. So obviously resistance training or weight training, and then interval training. So the first thing we want to do is define what they are. Okay. We then want to then give examples of them being used. So a footballer would use weight training to improve their muscular strength or muscular endurance. They would use interval training to maybe improve their speed. Okay. Now, you also then need to link that to the sport. So when would those be useful for the performer? So if I'm using weight training because it improves my muscular endurance or muscular strength, I'm going to use that in a game of football if I did continued running for long periods of time, which would be muscular endurance. If it's muscular strength, I can then hold off a player and things like that. I'm then going to use my AO3 knowledge. So I'm going to discuss which is more important. Okay, so I want to kind of rank which is more or less important. Okay, so which is more important for the footballer? Is it weight training? Is it interval training? After that, I'm then going to offer an alternative. So I would argue that fartlek training is better than both of them because it's going to be the changes of intensity which suits the needs of football more. So it's therefore more specific. I would then talk about both of them and maybe say that doing either method training does not guarantee you are a good footballer because obviously the skills are more important. Okay, so that's the sort of thing we're looking at. Okay, so that is kind of a bit of a plan. Again, you can do that on a piece of paper. You could for 6 mark of this one because I've only kind of got my AO1, AO2, AO3 in there. I need more AO3 points for a 9 mark question. Okay. So whose teacher is this? So Jake is there. Hi, Jake. He's one of ours. How long is the paper? The paper is an hour and 15 minutes. So you have an hour and 15 minutes to do 75 marks. Okay. Right. I'll do some quick ones. So I will go for another 3 or 4 minutes. Just some quick ones. Mechanical advantage is the distance between the foot of is the load arm divided by the effort arm. Excel is 145. Oh, lucky. Any tips on how you remember the pathway of air? Yeah, just think of a tree upside down. So if I've got a tree, think about it, I've got the trachea, so the trunk, I've got the branches, which are the bronchi, and the twigs are the bronchi. The leaves are the alveoli. This really helps. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Thanks, Jake. How do I get full marks for AO6? There's not an AO6. There's AO1, 2, and 3. Okay, so I think we are slowly coming to a bit of an end here. What happens if I've been sued for defamation of character? Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? Are you based in Sussex? No, I am based in Surrey in a place called Worcester Park. Okay, so thank you all for staying with us. So I think we've had 300, well, at the moment there are 360 people watching it, which for me is really, really flattering. So thank you for all you guys who have already watched. Again, if you follow me on Instagram, I'll put some quizzes on in the morning that might help you out in the morning. So it will give you the right answer along the way. And we'll be back here again on Thursday at 7:30 doing the paper 2 topics. Okay, so good luck, guys. Don't overthink it tonight. And the key thing is read the questions twice. The other one, take another pen and highlight what it's actually asking you to do. Okay, I'm from Malden Manor. Oh, fantastic, only around the corner. Okay, guys, good luck, enjoy it, and been a pleasure. Okay, bye-bye.